I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to the event, the LER Expo event. How can I introduce the More Balanced Brace into my practice? And how do I get my senior patients to say yes? And I'm just going to turn it over to you, Jason, and let you take it away.
The high level topic here is really how to introduce the utilization of AFOs for balance and fall prevention into clinical practice. And in our previous meetings, we've gone over some product, we've gone over some reimbursement topics, and we'll continue to expand on those subjects. Those previous meetings, if you have missed them, or if you'd like a reference as a reminder for those meetings and the content, those recordings are available either from Orthotica or from LER Expo. Similarly, we are recording tonight's meeting, and we'll make that available to everybody. My email at Orthotica is jason@orthotica.com, and if anything comes up in Dr. Moore's presentation in which you'd like a copy of or some additional background information, that's the best way to get it. I'll be happy to send out. In the past, we've done forms and documentation for compliance, that sort of thing. Tonight, this is a good program. I've heard versions of this over the years. Dr. Moore has a very unique practice in the middle of Kentucky and is probably the most experienced podiatrist, certainly that I know of, that is involved in the clinical use of AFOs for the prevention or mitigation of fall risk, prevention of falls. And, patients, I actually think that getting to say yes part, I don't want to oversimplify it. John, I know that you're very skilled at doing that, but I tend to think patients who are in need of this service are motivated to have a solution, because they do recognize that there is a direct correlation between the risk of a fall and their independent living. They may not like to admit that publicly, but somewhere that's inside of them. So they need to be shown a program that is credible, that is backed by science. And John will go through how he approaches his patients and how he deals with objection handling. If we have time tonight, we'll touch on this. If not, we'll dedicate one of our future sessions to this, which is once they have said yes, how do we really enhance the compliance, manage the expectations, manage things like footwear and its impact on outcomes and results. And so getting them to say yes is certainly the first step, and we'll cover that in some depth tonight. I'll jump back on at the end of the presentation, and I'll start curating questions or comments as they come. So, John, I'm going to mute myself and duck out visually and turn it over to you.
Very good. I am going to share screen here, so bear with me just 1 second. Okay. Okay, gentlemen, everything look okay?
Beautiful.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm grateful to be with you tonight, and I'm always honored and to be able to speak with you. And certainly thanks, Rich, for putting this on. And this is something I care a lot about, and this is a topic that I enjoy talking about because it's not only a big part of my professional practice, but it's just one of those things that we do that we enjoy doing, and that we enjoy how it impacts people's lives. And having been doing this for quite some time, I think I have some valuable pearls to share with you that I think will be helpful. The thing that I'll start off by saying, just as an introduction, is that what I will not be doing is telling you how to sell something. This isn't a car salesmanship 101 type of program. But at the same time, in many cases, throughout really all types of medicine, we have to do a good job of communicating information to our patients, especially regarding things that they need, that that they need. And I think that there are some doctors who oversell a variety of things, orthotics, among other things. And then I think there's probably more doctors who don't know how to confidently convey what the patients need, and they kind of beat around the bush and seem equivocal. There's far more of those than the latter, but what I want to try to convey to you is that it's really right in the middle that we want to be. We want to not come off as if we're selling something, but at the same time being confident enough in the science and in the technology and in the tools that we have to at least make an impact. And that's what I hope I can convey in the talk. What I want to try to do in this next few minutes is I want to just very quickly, for those of you who may not be familiar with the idea of AFOs for balance, I'll just introduce a couple of concepts and a couple things along the way. And then I want to get into how the patients, how to get a patient to say yes. And that's not hard to do when it comes to this. And I'll tell you what tools you need and maybe how to approach the patient in a verbal way, in a powerful communicative way. And then lastly, I want to share with you, I think what really makes the More Balanced Brace unique, some of the new features that I think even make it a more powerful tool among the things that we have to be able to address fall risk. So, there are some that it's most certainly taken some time for them to wrap their heads around the idea of using AFOs for balance, because people's perception of AFOs is that of a stiff, heavy, Forrest Gump type AFO that is going to actually stiffen their ankles or make it harder for them to drive or whatever case may be. And that is a common misperception that's based upon the fact that, based upon not only misinformation that's quite prevalent everywhere, but it's just a lack of experience handling this. I think if anyone picks this up and flexes it and identifies how light it is and how easy it is to put on, I think their perceptions would change. But for some people, they just may not understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll just tell you very briefly what we're trying to accomplish is, in essence, to improve postural stability, which comes from the ankles. It also comes from proprioceptive feedback, which is going to be enhanced by having the skin contact that we have, the contact with the brace in the upper part and the orthosis part. And there's lots of studies that validate the fact that we are basically improving postural stability and basically sensory feedback by using an orthotic in the form of an AFO. And so in essence, we're trying to improve gait, reduce gait deficits, which may include maybe, again, a ataxic gait, an unstable gait. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with this device. And so it all starts with really, again, us understanding it and being aware that this isn't something that's made in the John Moore backyard garage. This has been made by, this is being made by one of the best labs in the country. And it has been studied, has been demonstrated to be beneficial in journals like Gerontology, APMA, and or JATMA, and many others, and clinical biomechanics. I specifically made intention to not go through a bunch of studies, but just to identify the fact that this isn't some pie in the sky idea. This has been around for a long time. It's been studied. It's been demonstrated and validated as a valuable tool, not as a one-stop, all you need to stop falls. That's never been what we've taught. We've never taught that this somehow is going to magically stop every fall. This should be a part of a dynamic and active and multifactorial program, which is what I'm going to show you. I mean, that's ultimately the sales. That's ultimately what we're presenting to patients, is not a brace, but a program. And I'll demonstrate that to you as we go through. So what a lot of the studies that have been done, especially the one in gerontology, asks the question, can long-term use of a custom-made AFO really help in sustaining mobility, reducing risk of falls? And basically the answer is yes. And if you have interest in reading about that in the journal and other articles, I'm sure we can make those available to you. But it's suffice it to say that we should be well past the point where these have been validated to really help people. And how do we address in our practice? And again, there's CPEDs on this call. I really want to just take a moment to thank you for all of the certified podorthists that are on this call, and those that are involved in bracing as a whole. I noticed some good names, some people who are podorthists, but all of without showing you a bunch of studies that as lower extremity experts, how do we address mechanical deficits? How do we address gait deficits? We address them through orthosis. And when it comes to falls, we're dealing with multifactorial problems that some of which may be vestibular, some of it may be again proprioceptive feedback. Patients with neuropathy, diabetes have a substantially higher risk of falling. But we're all in the business of correcting and addressing biomechanical deficits, and that's what we're doing. We're going to be the most impactful in addressing fall risk by trying to address as many risk factors as we can, and again, the brace is a big part of that. But footwear, and of course therapy, muscle strengthening, all of those things are a part of this puzzle. So when it comes to presenting this concept to patients, I think it really has to come down to this idea of a root system and how we improve stability in our body. A big part of the way we enhance stability is by stabilizing the feet and ankles. And I use this analogy, and I use it all the time. In fact, Jason's heard this many times, and my patients have heard it many times, where, what I do when I try to explain the concept from like a high level is that we're putting something in place that is the equivalent of an enhanced root system. So I ask a patient, Mrs. Jones, when a tree is planted and grows along the shore and a hurricane comes, what is it that's going to keep that tree upright and from falling over? And patients always know the answer. The answer is the roots. How firm, how stable, how deep are those roots? And I think that we're basically kind of doing the same thing by again addressing the where the body really gains its postural stability, and it's in the feet and ankles. And if we don't have a connection between the nervous system and the extremities in our brain, and we know that there are various things that can disrupt that. Diabetes, neuropathy, again, radiculopathy, a lot of other conditions can disrupt that feedback, that sensory feedback in the feet. When you lose that, you're going to really, really lose your sense of stability and your ability to stand upright. But again, having this type of stabilizing brace on can help to enhance that gap and again the disconnect between in the neurological system. So in essence, what we're doing with a brace is addressing postural instability that may come from a variety of things, and then we're also trying to enhance again that neurological feedback, that sensory feedback. So in essence, what we're trying to do is enhance the foundation, and I believe that at least for me, and I've done this for years, I make sure that my staff have bought in and understand the system. I've been practicing for over 20 years, and I've gone through staff. I've had some great ones leave. I've had some bad ones go, and I currently have two really wonderful staff members that I've trained. I take the time to help them understand, number one, what they should be looking for when patients are brought back, because many times I may be in the room, I may be in another room, but I also find ways to incentivize them for helping me to identify patients. So as we move forward into the future, and there are some very exciting pieces of technology that are soon to come when it comes to doing a fall risk assessment and actually getting paid for a fall risk assessment, and having something computerized that can really validate what you're doing from a DME standpoint. That's coming soon. So I'm excited about that. But as we as the technology improves for us to, identify patients quicker, to validate them faster in our EHR and our medical records, but then also to scan them and literally have the brace being made the next day. That's one thing that we have really started doing more, and that is my staff are scanning more than we ever have, and so again, it can be where does it all start and end? It all starts with your staff, and so as part of, again, my mechanism of being successful and getting patients to say yes, a big part of that is my staff. And so I want my staff to come in and say things like, Mrs. Jones, these things that Dr. Moore recommending, I've seen really help patients. And they're not making that up. Of course, my staff, we're putting ABs on patients every day. So that it's not as though they have to really stretch to say that, but that's the kind of thing that really helps, is to have your staff involved, to have your staff, basically coming back in, or even before you come in, saying, oh, we've got some really good tools. We've got some really exciting technology that Dr. Moore is going to go over with you. And then afterwards, them coming in when they scan the patients, saying, oh, I'm really glad you said yes, because this is going to be exciting. And then they can also make sure that they get the patients excited and get the patients aware of what to expect. And so again, training, incentivizing staff. So in my practice, I tell my nursing staff the type of language, the type of things I want them to ask. One of the things that they know not to ask is, Miss Jones, have you fallen? I like for my patients to ask things like, I've noticed that you aren't too steady on your feet. How is your balance? Or are you feeling unsteady? If you're asking yourself, well, what's the difference between that and asking them if they've fallen? Well, there's a very subtle difference, and that is that patients are far more likely to admit balance problems than they would admit to falling. You have to understand that senior patients, number one, are fearful of admitting falls, and there are many studies that bear this out. They're fearful of admitting falls because they're afraid of what may happen to their independence, driving, among other things. So it's much more effective to ask the patients if they're steady or not steady on their feet, if they've had balance problems, and if they admit to those, let them tell you that they've fallen, because they're far more likely to admit it to you than they are to again, engage in a conversation about a fall from you asking. And again, that may sound a little like there's psychiatry involved, but there is intent behind this. And then what my staff will do is to tell them and to excite them by saying, Mrs. Jones, the Life and Balance program we have here, and of course we have posters on all the rooms, so the nurses can actually refer them to it, and to the 3 parts of the program. So again, I think the very most effective way, in getting patients to say yes, is making sure your staff is involved in the process. Things like this. And I think that also, again, having this poster, having these tools, which I'll show to you as we go through. This is a poster that's been produced by, it's our first draft. I think there'll be another draft that we were always trying to improve things. But this is a very effective poster to put on your wall. And again, it asks at the top, do you feel unsteady when you stand or walk? And that is the most effective question to ask a patient. And I think it's the most powerful way of really getting patients to respond to you and to actually talk about it. And so again, this is again one of the tools that we introduce our patients. The other thing that I think is very important is to convey to our staff. That's why we're going to try to help you, sweetheart. Are the most common characteristics of those at risk, and it's really simple. If someone has to use an assistive device, they are at risk. Keep coming. If someone requires help or assistance, or if they have to hold on to the walls, slowly turn around and to walk into your treatment rooms, they're at risk. When a patient's using an assistive device and clearly are dragging their feet, and notice, again, the people exiting my office are all using assistive devices. These are all balance patients. And so, again, highly recommend that not only you become aware of these things, because I mean, it should be relatively obvious that if you have a patient that's coming in with an assistive device, they're not doing that for fashion purposes. They're using it because they're feeling unsteady. If you have a patient that needs help walking into the treatment room, or if they're holding on to the wall or services to get into your treatment room, those are common sense things that probably a 10-year-old could pick up if you're just looking for them. Again, this is how I've trained my staff. I say, I'll literally point out to them, this is a patient that's really at risk of falling. If anyone comes in that's using an assistive device, give them the brochure, prep them, and when I go in, I'll be prepared. So again, it's really just being able to see what's right in front of you. Okay, the reality of all of this is this. There's clearly some patients that just may not benefit from the brace or a shoe. But here's the thing that I want to convey to you is that you can guess which ones may benefit, but you don't really know unless you try it. I mean, to me, the most presumptuous and dangerous thing you could do is look at a patient who clearly is at risk and say, oh, they'll not use it. They won't use it, or they won't be compliant, or they won't like it because of this patient. That to me is the most presumptuous and dangerous thing to do if you're if you're addressing falls, because ultimately you don't know that. You can guess that, but you don't know it until you've tried it. And so what I try to convey to patients is that even those that are skeptical, cynical, is that I will flat out tell them that, Mrs. Jones, you don't really know how it's going to do unless you try it. I've had the most skeptical patients put those things on and never take them off. They wear them every time they come in and see me. And then I have some people who will refuse them despite the fact, in other words, they'll come in and there'll be some that don't wear them back in to see you, and they'll flat out tell you, I'm just too lazy to put them on. But when I do wear them, I feel a lot more stable. And then, of course, there's going to be some people that you come across that aren't willing to try anything because either they're stubborn or they're convinced that nothing's going to help them. And I will tell you that if there's any pearl of wisdom I could pass on to you, if you want to be effective in presenting this and utilizing these tools to help address fall risk, if you in any way are equivocal, doubtful, or you even remotely sound not confident in what these things can do, or are at least you're not positive about it, I will tell you, you will immediately put them off of them. The patients will refuse them because they sense doubt in your presentation. Seniors are not that thrilled of trying anything new anyway, unless you convey a level of confidence that they have a chance to help. You're not guaranteeing they're going to help. You're not telling them, hey, I guarantee that these things are going to change your life, or that these are going to stop every future fall. But I tell them, Mrs. Jones, it's really worthwhile to try it because, these things could be very effective in reducing falls. In fact, the clinical biomechanics study that was done quite some time ago said about 30%. You may reduce the risk of falling up to 30% by trying these. And so, I've been using them for a long time. Many of you on this call may not have ever used them. That doesn't mean you can't be confident if you read the studies and again make yourself familiar with these. But I will tell you, I've been in many offices where I've heard the doctor present this, and honestly, they sound so unbelievably equivocal. In other words, they just sound as though they don't really either care or they're not sure. Again, using words like, well, maybe these will help you, or perhaps these will help you, or, that's the kind of way that you'll immediately get a refusal. So, again, that's kind of common sense. So if this is your look in presenting anything, I mean, whether it's surgery or orthotic or a balance AFO, good luck getting patients to say yes to anything, because this is the kind of way that many doctors present. They don't look the patients in the eye. They're fumbling around on their phone or iPad while they're talking to them, or they just sound like they don't care. that's a good, easy way for the patient to say, no, thank you. So there are many studies and a growing body of evidence to support how devastating a lack of confidence can be in any medical practice. Success correlates just as closely with confidence as it does with competence. In fact, the Harvard Business Review, basically in this really interesting article, Replace Meaningless Words with Meaningful Ones, advises us to replace weak, meaningless words with stronger ones. Like, again, he advises to replace words like I think, I believe, I feel, for things like I'm confident, I'm convinced, I expect. These simple replacements can make a massive difference in how our message is perceived. And that's what I would convey to you, is that when you're presenting this, you do not want to come off as a car salesman, but you don't want to come off as if you don't care, or if you're not really sure whether it's going to be effective. I've put enough of these on where I know they'll be effective if they're compliant with them. I know that they can help reduce falls in a large percent of patients, and clearly there's going to be some patients who don't adapt to them. But I'm not going to decide that before we try them. I mean, I'm not going to say, Mrs. Jones, you wouldn't benefit from these by an assumption or by, again, my deduction. I'm going to do everything I can to help mitigate a fall. And that's not going to be just including a brace. It's going to be ordering PT, OT. It's going to be getting the patients in the right shoes and educating them. So what should you do when you're presenting this? You should make sure that you're smiling, appropriate physical contact, confident language, and impactful arguments. Now, what do I mean by that? Because impactful arguments, well, that does not mean you get an argument with the patient. It does not mean that you become dogmatic in a conversation. It doesn't mean that you, again, become argumentative or basically, someone who is insisting upon something. What I mean by that is being able to make convincing arguments for, again, the validation of the reason why you're using these. And one thing that, I'll share with you some as we go, but, the most powerful, impactful argument is that, Mrs. Jones, you're clearly at risk of falling. You've fallen before. If how many falls does it take to end up in a nursing home? And if there was something that could reduce your risk of falling 30, 40%, would you be willing to try it? Again, and then telling patients that lower extremity problems, neuropathy, deformity, foot pain, abnormal gait, represents a large number of falls, and that this device can help address those issues. Again, that's an impactful argument. And again, I'm using language that's not overly scientific. I'm not saying, Mrs. Jones, your proprioceptive ability and your neurological sense is this or that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to talk about the fact that this will help you feel your foot better, or it may make you more steady on your feet when you begin to lose your balance, or if you step on an uneven surface, this device will help you maintain your balance. Again, that's simple language. It's not overly scientific language. And then lastly, again, I want to make sure we're all on the same page in that we're not selling a brace. We're not trying to convince patients to do a brace. We're convincing them to become part of a multidimensional or multifactorial program. And that's why we've devised what's called the Life and Balance program. And it's a very easy to remember. It's a 3-step approach that includes, again, addressing the risk factors, the lower extremity risk factors for falling, which there are many. I'll share a slide with you in a minute. And then again, getting the patients the right footwear, and then again, physical therapy, strengthening, addressing muscle weakness, those types of things. So how do I convey the Life and Balance program? Well, I say, Mrs. Jones, this is a nationally recognized and respected program. The shoe, the ankle support, by the way, I very seldom use the word brace when I describe this device. I will basically call it, in most cases, a balance support. The shoe, the balance support, physical therapy, this program is perfect for you. This evidence-based program can help you stay mobile, independent, and active. And that's how I present it. And what is it really? It's a lower extremity fall risk modification program. It's addressing, again, a lot of different risk factors. It's covered by most all insurances, and it will work optimally if you do all three. And so that's how I convey it. So so I said this a minute ago, but I think it's important, and I'll share with you some pearls a little bit further down the road. But how do we close the deal? How do we make sure the patients are going to follow through? We educate, we make it easy for them. And of course, we're going to make sure that they have the right shoe to go with them. The number one problem in dispensing any AFO, not just this brace, but any AFO, the largest gap in many practices that exist, the disconnect, is the inability for doctors to get a shoe in place when these come in. It's the inability to shoe these. In fact, I will tell you, over many, many years, I've had doctors come and say, I started using the brace, and the patients kind of sometimes struggle with them. I'm not getting the best outcomes. And I'll ask them, the first thing I'll ask them is that, hey, well, what shoe are you putting them in? They go, what do you mean putting them in a shoe? I'm not putting them in any shoe. I'm just jamming it in what they come in with. And I'll just look at them and I'll say it will never work. I mean, it'll never work if you're trying to put this customized brace in a easy spirit or the most recent Sketcher, or again, it's just not going to work. And many of the slip-on shoes that patients are wearing in ECU. So we have always made sure the patient had a shoe. And so that's why I include that as part of the Life and Balance program. And again, I make it easy for them. And one way that I make it easy for them is I make sure they don't have to either come back for multiple visits. I'm not saying it's wrong to have them come back in to get scanned or get casted. I will tell you that for a senior that's being, in many cases, driven by a family member or whatever, having them have to come back, you will have a fairly large percentage of them that don't come back. So I make it easy from them from the standpoint of fitting and of course shoeing, and then making sure that we cast them effectively as quick as we can. So that's important. Now let's talk about, again, some tools of communication. Again, we've talked about effective staff training and protocols. That's key for me. Utilizing your staff to gather information. That is a key point for me as well. And again, I use my staff effectively, thoroughly in that regard to make sure that we're, again, not missing patients that I may miss because I didn't see them walk, or that maybe I'm behind, or whatever the case may be. But again, when it comes to doing the fall risk assessments that are soon to be available technology wise, you're going to want to have your staff trained to gather this information. And then again, probably the most powerful and effective way to communicate anything and be effective is visual aids. Your kindergarten teacher figured that out. Again, all teachers know this. And if you want to be an effective educator, you have to have visual aids. And the three visual aids that I use the most are the poster, which is in every room I have, a version of the MBB, a sample, and then, of course, a brochure. My nurses hand out most of the brochures in my clinic. And then, of course, I will oftentimes, if patients want to see what it looks like, I'll have one available for them to see. So what are some things to remember? Again, these patients are seniors in most cases. Now, don't get me wrong. Not all of my MBB patients are like really old. I mean, I have 40, 50-year-olds that wear the MBBs that have severe neuropathy, that have other neurological problems. I've got, again, a host of younger people that most of whom have some form of neurological deficit that they just can't feel their feet. And those are very effective. But again, in most cases, when you're dealing with a senior, look them in the eye so they can see your lips move. Remain clear. Sit close to the patient. Don't. If you're doing this presentation with your hand on the doorknob, you will not be very effective. Be close to the patient. look them in the eye. Don't be equivocal, which means that you kind of look as though you don't really care, or that it doesn't really matter, or hey, whatever. If you have teenagers, you know exactly what that means. Don't be away to your patients. Be confident. Don't mumble. And again, I like to convey to my patients, Mrs. Jones, what is it really that you have to lose in trying this? You don't really have anything to lose, but you have a lot to gain by trying and utilizing this program. Will there be objections and questions? Inevitably, yes. But I will tell you that if I present the MBB to 10 people, 8 are going to basically say, sign me up. If you have family members in the room, that percentage may go up, but there's going to be a handful of people who say, that ask several questions that say, hey, do these work? How do they work? And we have to be able to answer these questions. And let me just give you a few to think about. Number one is that these sound really expensive. And the first thing I'll tell the patients is that, Mrs. Jones, we will do an assessment, but in most cases these are covered. And I tell them that there's really not any part of this process that's not covered. And so again, I address the financial part of this by saying these are covered. You may have a copay. I will check to see if you have a deductible. If they have a deductible, obviously that at least some of that needs to be conveyed up front. But most of my patients don't have deductibles. They're dealing with copays. They're dealing with maybe an 80-20 plan or something along those lines. And then in most cases, it's all covered. But again, I just tell them, Mrs. Jones, these are typically covered. We will, if you want more detailed information about coverage, we can get that to you. But in most cases, you'll know whether they have an 80-20. Or they may have, again, a 96.4%. I have some of my managed care Medicares that have that. But let them know and get front about that. What do these things look like? You can show them a picture of it in the poster, or you can have one available. And this is a common question that I get that sounds kind of ridiculous, but and that's just, do I have to wear these all the time? And I will answer that question by asking them, do you have to wear your eyeglasses all the time? That's how I typically ask them. That's what I ask in return. No one's going to make you wear these, Mrs. Jones. And no, you don't have to wear them all the time. But my hope is that when you start using them, you'll want to wear them all the time. And so the last thing you want to do is tell a patient, a senior patient especially, that these have to be worn every moment of every day. If you do a good job of casting, getting these things in and shoeing them right, they'll want to wear them, unless they're just obstinate or they can't bend over or they can't put them on themselves. If they have to depend on a family member to put these on, obviously that's going to reduce your compliance and success rate. But by the most important thing is, again, shoeing these things correctly to make them comfortable. And then lastly, as part of this, what about shoeing these? Well, there's several approaches that you can take. And again, I have been employing one way of doing this for many, many years with great success. And that is that I bundle a shoe with the brace. And what that means is that I have one or two go-to shoes. I know what they cost. I know how quickly I'm going to get them in. I know how well they're going to work with the brace because I've used them before. And basically I tell the patient that there is a pair of shoes that I'm going to order for you. And I don't give them like the full catalog. I don't give them 50 options. I give them 2 options. And I include that. Now, if they want a New Balance, or if they want a shoe that I may not be offering, or if they want something else, have a list of shoes they can go purchase on their own if they so choose. But you've got to be very specific as to what type of shoe you'll accept, what type of shoe is best for them, and let them go buy them on their own if you want. but you need to measure them and you need to have a shoe recommendation list. Now, I do not do this because inevitably the patient will go to Walmart or they'll go to Shoe Carnival and buy something you don't want them to buy. So I don't employ that, but if you want to do that, you can. But what I do is when I cast the patients, my staff orders a shoe. It comes in, we have their name on it, and when the brace is dispensed, the shoe just goes with it. That's what I do. Now, you can, if you so choose, you can take care of the cost of that shoe. You can ask the patients to, again, to pay the cost. But if you do that, you cannot dispense that shoe to Medicare for a different price. So if you're going to charge the patient in any way, shape, or form, you have to do it. You have to use the same price that you bill Medicare. And so that's another reason why I don't do that. I bundle the shoe in to the device to maximize its effectiveness, to maximize benefit, and to make sure that the brace is going to be able to work optimally. And so what's not an option is ignoring the shoe and waiting hoping the patient comes in wearing, a perfect shoe. They won't. I can guarantee you that. Now, clearly, there's going to be some patients that have diabetic shoes or that are diabetic and that have coverage for shoes. By all means, get them a shoe that's going to work with the brace. Now, among some of the ones that I like the most for the MBB I like anodyne shoes. They're very light. They have Velcro. They have some good features. And I like some of the ProPay shoes. Those are just a couple of names off the top of my head that I can mention. All right. So the key is do something, not nothing. Another common question is how long will these last? I tell the patients 5 years. And if there's something that happens to them before them, that I'm obligated to help them correct or fix that issue. And there are ways we can do that. In fact, get some of the cost back for, again, a modification or a refurb of the AFO. There are codes for that. And then, of course, you're going to always have someone that asks, okay, if I'm paying 20% of that, how much is it going to be? So I will tell you what my approach has been in this regard. And you can choose to do this any which way you want. I tell the patients that have a 20% or that have, maybe have some responsibility to, I let them know that I legally have to send them a bill. I'd never tell patients that I'm not going to send you a bill or that I'm just going to not charge you the 20% because that is basically, that can nullify your contract with the insurance company you're working with. It is not legal to do that. You should not do that. But what I do is I tell them that if or when you get a bill for your percentage, if you bring that bill into me, I can work with you, but I have to send you a bill. Now, what I will oftentimes do is when the patients bring that bill back in, I can work with them on the bill. In fact, one of the common things that I do is I'll do a match pay system. Again, by sending them a bill, and again, if I need to, I'll send them another bill. But by sending them a bill, I am validating and verifying that I'm attempting to collect their copay, which is what you're supposed to do. But that doesn't mean I can't work with them on the copay by doing a match pay system. So if they have a $100 bill, I can basically match a payment. But what I won't do is I won't write it off. I don't tell the patients I'm going to write it off, but I can work with them on their payment in a match pay system. I recommend that. I've used it for years. It's very effective. Patients feel gratified that you work with them on it. But again, I don't want to scare patients off with the 20%. I don't want to tell them, oh yes, Mr. Jones, we're going to come after you with a baseball bat. But I'm going to basically convey to them, I'm going to work with you on that percentage. What about those patients that say, I'm not quite sure? Well, one thing that you could do is you can, again, one thing I have dozens and dozens of them. I have patients who've signed a waiver that have on video conveyed how these things have helped them. You can show them videos like that you've gotten, again, approval to show them. You have to have the patient sign a waiver validating that. I have those waivers that I've done. And of course, I've done patient interviews for years and years. I have many of them. But you can also just say, Mrs. Jones, you know what? I think that you could benefit from these because I've done a lot of them. I've seen that they're effective. And but you know what? I don't think you're going to really know unless you try them. And I'd recommend that you give it a try. And the worst case scenario is that you don't use them. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you use them. I'm going to do everything I can to make them effective and comfortable, but no one's going to make you wear them. And so how do these things work? Well, I like to use the analogy I gave earlier in that we're trying to enhance the foundation. And again, a tree with strong roots laughs at storms. Again, APMA, the JATMA, of course, I was involved with a great group of people that performed this analysis, this meta-analysis of, again, lower extremity risk factors and treatments that include the MBB. And again, I like to just, as part of my intervention, I'm going to make sure that I'm addressing any issue that can cause the patient pain or discomfort by making sure they're in the right shoe, addressing, again, their biomechanical risk factors. And again, everything we do is in conjunction and consistent with the study document that's put out by the CDC. We are soon going to begin to be using some new technology for doing fall risk assessments. This is not the place for that conversation. But what I want to convey is this, and that is when you look at risk factors for falling, among the top of them, muscle weakness, gait deficits, balance deficits, these are all things that we can address. We can address all three of these risk factors using an AFO and using shoes and, of course, PT and OT. So we shouldn't be asking the question, what is the disease that's causing this problem? But it's what combination of physiological changes and diseases are causing this, because they're all multifactorial. I just want to highlight real quick for you just a couple of features. Number one is that the new MBB has a full contact real orthosis component to it. This isn't some prefab, flat, non-custom looking AFO like a lot of the knockoffs that are out there on the market. I look at some of those and I'd shake my head wondering how on earth those don't even look custom, but these are customized to the arch. And if you notice on the bottom picture, we've created an extrinsic post to stabilize the heel even more than they were, addressing postural sway. We're all leather now. There's no icky mesh that gets stuck with a bunch of lint. They're all leather. And notice this arch. This patient has some PTDD going on with their balance deficit. So, and look at the stability we're creating in the middle part of the foot, which is stopping some of the rolling. And this is an average looking MBB. We have really enhanced the arch and the midfoot component of the brace. We have a pad that goes over the shin, easy Velcro strap that can be adjusted. And again, we're fitting these things with really good shoes. Notice how these patients are walking heel to toe. We're lifting their foot. They can't drag it as much. This is a patient in a new pair of shoes that we got for them. This is one of the Anodyne Velcro shoes, which I really like. This patient just picked these up. He's new to them. He doesn't have a sock yet that goes high enough. Of course, we get all these patients in socks. But again, watching them walk and then immediately feel that benefit is pretty awesome. But this is an example of how good these orthotics are in that are part of the AFO. Again, these are truly customized braces. Listen to this patient.
I like to wear these. They make my feet feel more firm.
Yes, right. And do you feel like it helps your balance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
great.
it does.
Great. I know you're using the walker, and I'm glad to see you using that.
I had a cane before.
Okay.
And I don't have to use it now.
Okay, good. So you're just using the walker, or do you in the house, do you sometimes just walk without the walker?
Short distance.
Short distance. I'm glad. So again, I can have this patient listen to this. Another patient. These are just within the past few weeks.
Tell me, it feels so good, so good. I can tell the big difference.
Okay, and tell me what you're feeling that's making it feel good.
I think it's the stabilizing.
Yeah.
I think it's just the walking that. Before it was almost like I wanted to
like roll your ankles,
yeah.
Or kind of roll.
Yeah, I didn't realize that my ankles were so weak.
Yeah.
But
well, when you stabilize them, it sure does make a difference.
Yeah, it's just because when you put them on, I thought, oh, this is something that's going to feel good, but they feel it's like when you support
Oh,
something.
I'm so glad to hear
It's
that.
like,
So again, these are patients that I didn't solicit for this. I just literally, I was dispensing them. I have them walk, and if I could literally do that for every one of them, and clearly these are patients who haven't been in them that long. These are patients that are just getting that initial feel. But I just want you to highlight. I want to highlight the fact these are flexible, they're light, they're easy to put on. This is one of our staff scanning the patients. Again, avoid bad cast. Learn how to cast properly or scan properly. These are PDAC approved for 3 L codes, L1940, 2330, 2820. These are reimbursed very well. Again, well worth your time and effort. Again, making sure they're in the right footwear is key to this. Again, we want to identify a plan that really, again, there has to be a plan, especially for our MIPS qualifying factors. We need to have a plan that should include, again, modifying footwear, modifying mechanics through some type of orthosis, education, PT. And again, what's this all about? It's about really doing something as opposed to nothing, because all it takes is one fall and you can lose your independence. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to switch this back. I'm going to finish the presentation. And Jason, again, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, John. That was great information. I'm hoping that everyone got something out of it and enjoyed it as much as I did. I've heard it before, and I learn something every time. There are some questions I'll go through, but before I do, just as a broad discussion point, Dr. Moore, the difference between trying to influence a patient and trying to manipulate a patient, where's that line in how you approach it and how you think about it?
Well, I mean, I've studied and know what falls due to people, and Jason, you know that too. I mean, you've shared with me stories and about how devastating they can be. I know many. Well, when you know how devastating these can be, and when you think about priorities and what we do in practice, we as podiatrists, we focus so much on nails, calluses, plantar fasciitis, tinea pedis, onychomycosis. As far as I've heard, Jason, none of those have killed people. And so when you think about it, fall risk, when I convey this, when I talk to patients, I make sure that it's something that's coming from, I care about you. I make sure that I'm in a very honest and right way conveying that I truly don't want you to fall, because I'll lose you as a patient. You could lose your independence. So I think that you'd have to be a real narcissist to be manipulative in this regard. I can't. I guess I've seen in my career a lot more people who are very apathetic about it, as opposed to being kind of manipulative. But I think if you convey that you care about them and that you're recommending these things because you don't want them to fall, and that because you know that how they could lose their independence, I think that's the difference, is conveying in your language, you're being empathetic, you're looking them in the eye, you're conveying that this is coming from not a financial place, but a place that really comes from wanting to keep them from falling. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a bit of a trick question, but people have asked that of me, so I thought I'd ask it of you. But yeah, for me, when you're trying to manipulate, usually it's you have malintent. You're doing something that benefits you, not them. And if you're trying to influence them to make the right choice for themselves, it's really putting your patients first. So this is not everything that you presented, I think, was helping our audience be more influential presenters to their patients for the benefit of the patients.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just go over a few of the questions that have come through. Sanja had a couple of questions. One was, if you give 5 years guarantee on the orthotics, do you give them the same guarantee for any shoes? And I do not think that even expensive shoes last 5 years. And does Medicare cover the shoes needed to accommodate the brace, and how often?
Okay, so let me go down the list. Number one, and if they're not diabetic, they don't have coverage for shoes.
Right.
So the only condition where shoes are covered is if you have diabetes. Now, many of my patients are diabetic. I would say maybe even half of them. of my senior patients that I see in the clinic are diabetic. So in those cases, a shoe is covered. Of course, a shoe won't last 5 years. A shoe is lucky to last a year. And so we don't guarantee anything about a shoe. In fact, we tell them that the shoe will probably last them maybe a year or maybe slightly less. And when they need a new shoe, they're going to have to purchase a new shoe. We're not going to provide them ongoing shoes. But we always, when we dispense the MBB, we order a shoe. If they have coverage for them, we will do that. If they do not, we bundle it. In other words, we provide them the shoe. And again, I eat that cost. And I'm looking at a cost of maybe around $50. But I'm going to, my compliance rates, my success rates are going to literally go up tenfold by making sure they're in the right shoe. And if anyone is maybe suggesting, or maybe in the back of their minds thinking, well, maybe that's inducement, or maybe is providing a shoe for the patient in order for the brace to work, an inducement, 100%. It's not. In fact, I've consulted a very well-known attorney, basically a medical-based attorney, healthcare attorney, and I've run this by them. And unless you're trying to, in some way, manipulate them to get a brace, and they'll get a new shoe because of it, if it's somehow conveyed that way, which is almost comical, it's not an inducement. You're providing the patient with what they need to make the brace work. And for many of my patients, I live in Southern Kentucky, they can't afford to go online and buy a $155 shoe. If you want to have them do that, that's an option that you have. You can basically say, Mrs. Jones, the shoes that go with this cost $155. Yeah, good luck. I mean, but I've been doing this for probably 15 years, and I make sure every one of my patients is in the right shoe. But I do not cover shoes on an ongoing basis. What I tell the patients is that they can have their shoe replaced with proper documentation, every 5 years, a new brace can be provided. And if there's a problem with brace, whether it begins to break down or the leather breaks down or there's an issue, I will do everything I can to address that. That's my obligation. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. I think it did. Just as one quick follow-up, if the patient happens to be diabetic, the reimbursement for shoes is a calendar year. They're eligible for a new pair of shoes if it's medically necessary once every calendar year.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So Lori Lasky asked about how do you address the 5-year same or similar rule? Lori, I'm not sure if you're asking that question in regard to how do you address it with the patients or how do you address it in your clinic more broadly? But John, maybe you can just touch on that for 1 second.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. With the volume of AFOs that I do, I would say that, I'm hit with maybe 10, 15% of them are same and similar. And so there is a percentage of them that are same and similar. And what I try to do is identify them ahead of time, which is hard to do sometimes. I mean, unless the patients just flat out say, just keep in mind, of course, same and similar is not just AFOs. It's cam walkers, it's ankle braces, it's a variety of things which are just absolutely ridiculous that qualify as same and similar. It could be a night splint. And so for those that we can identify ahead of time, I know exactly what I need to document. Those will be, I will get that basically that same and similar notation on the EOB. I'll know exactly what I need to do. I basically turn the note around, knowing exactly what they need. I'll be able to identify what DME they've gotten before, whether it's a cam walker, and I'll have to put in my note that this item that they're getting is for a new condition. It's not applicable to the old condition, and that the patients need this device with their current condition as it is. I have to just have, again, I have a template that just is inserted into the EHR but you have to explain why this device is needed, separate, identifiable from the other product.
Hey, John. Lori clarified the question. She was wondering how you address it with the patients.
I don't get into same and similar with patients. I don't discuss that with them. I that's really not something I need to now here's the deal. A lot of people advocate and have advocated that you need to get an advanced beneficiary notice, an ABN. I have gotten those signed before. If I 100% know that there's a same and similar issue, which in my case I oftentimes don't, and so I have to deal with it after the fact, I'll have them sign an ABN, and I'll put on the ABN same and similar, and I'll explain it to them at that point. But I would say that of my maybe 15% or so that go to same and similar, I'm going to catch probably a very small percent of those, because most of them are cam walkers, Jason. It's not braces, it's cam walkers. Because I don't know about you where you live, but our urgent care centers, our fast paces, I mean, they give cam walkers out like candy. I mean, patients come in with an ingrown toenail to their local and they get a cam walker. So again, it's usually a cam walker. Those are easy to overturn when it comes to the same and similar issue, but I don't bring it up unless I have them sign an ABN, and I don't have every one of my patients sign ABNs. So you may find some that advocate that. Some of the, maybe some of the APMA coding experts recommend that, but I don't in every case.
Okay. We have a couple of questions from Eugene. He asks if our braces are the same as OHI fall prevention program. This brace is their brace is not covered with leather, like you stated. Your braces are. Thanks. So I think I'll handle that quick question, and you can embellish if you like, John. But for those who don't know, the co-founders of Orthotica are myself and my partner Peter Karolidis. Both of us were senior executives at OHI for many years. Left somewhat recently and decided to go back into the industry with a new creation called Orthotica. And so there is some similarities in terms of the broad construct of the fall prevention program and the commitment and the passion for the subject. The physical product, however, is quite different. This generation of the more balanced brace is something that really has been conceived over many years. Dr. Moore, instrumental in trying to improve something that worked quite well for a very long time. Tens of thousands of patients were fitted with the braces while Peter and I ran the OHI enterprise. And during that time, Dr. Moore made a number of suggestions about ways that it could be improved. And all of those suggestions were eventually tested and incorporated into what we're now calling the MBB Signature Edition. So the one, Eugene, that you mentioned about leather lining, that came about really because of the experience with the prior brace. The prior brace started to delaminate, and the textile pilled after only short usage. And this all predates same and similar with a 5-year expectation. And our feeling was we could get all the benefits of the broad design and improve some of the materials so that patient comfort would be enhanced, the longevity, the device would be enhanced. And I think, Dr. Moore, you could speak to your experience over the last 18 months of using it.
Yeah. Well, I have my wish list of things that I wanted on the brace, and I wanted to do with the brace for a long time. And one of my frustrations was, well, I'll just list a few. Number one was the material that Jason mentioned. The brace in its first incarnation was all leather. It started as an all leather brace, and it was very early in the process that we, in our attempts to make it really light, is to decrease the weight. And so we used the material that is currently being used right now on the brace that I brought to OHI again many years ago. And so that, again, it collects every form of dust and lint and everything else, and it deteriorated quickly. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the arch system on the new version is not even close to the I guess the old, I think what's referred to as the Arizona balance brace. It's not even close. I mean, it's truly customized. It has substantial support, and in addition to that, I oftentimes will ask for additional wedging or additional materials to be added to help even further stabilize the medial column. And then thirdly, the biggest difference is the extrinsic post. It's a bigger extrinsic post. It's more pronounced in that it just creates a far more stable platform. When you set a new MBB up, the signature edition up on a table, it stands up in every case. I cannot say the same about the prior version. In many cases, it was inconsistent with regards to the posting system on that. And then, of course, it's a single strap instead of two straps. So again, there's probably maybe 6 or 7 key differences that really make it, I think, far better and far more effective. So, and again, I think you just got to get your hands on one and see for yourself kind of what it's a big difference. Most of the knockoffs, and I'm going to refer to all of the other balance braces knockoffs. I hope I don't offend anybody by saying that, but they're all knockoffs. But when you look at the arch system, it looks flat. I mean, it literally looks non-custom. And so if you don't really maximize arch fill, if you don't have a really stabilizing device that's flexible at the right place, it's not doing good. So anyway.
Thank you. A couple of questions regarding the use of inserts with the brace to deal with offloading, pre-ulcerative calluses in your diabetic patients. Can a brace and like a dual density insert be used and made together? So I know your practice, John, does prescribe that for some of those patients. It is, if you're going to do that, the time to do that is at the time that the brace is being made. So that will mold the contours of the brace around the contours of the insert so that they fit like a glove, and it reduces the overall bulk of having both inside the shoe.
Yeah, so it's very shoe dependent. There are cases in which I can have this sit on a dual density insole as long as the heel I can grind down. I don't want the brace sitting on a unlevel situation. So there have been some cases where I really feel like I need it incorporated into the brace, and that's an option. There are some cases where I don't really need it incorporated into the brace. I just want to have it sitting on top of something that has a little padding in the front. I do that a lot too. So I have a grinder. You can take a heat mold. You can take a diabetic style insole, take it to the grinder, grind down the heel. So the brace is not sitting on a contoured heel. So I make sure it's flat and I put it in. And as long as you have a really good depth shoe, and that may not work in a Brooks or New Balance, but it will certainly work in one of the Anodynes or one of the Orthofeets or the Pro-Pays. I mean, you'll have that extra space in there to do that. And yeah.
Similarly, Sandy touches on a similar topic about possibly just extending the leather distally and using that extension as sort of a housing, if you will, for an accommodative pad to off-weight, forefoot lesion. We do that as well. So it can be built into the brace itself. We could extend the MBB either to the toe sulcus or to the end of the toes, and then off-weight a bony prominence or a lesion site.
Let me just make one point on that, and that is that you're going to find a patient far more inclined to wear this and be more stable the lower to the ground they're going to be. So you really want to stay thin. I'll tell you, when I first designed this some 20 something years ago, one of the first incarnations, I extended the plastic out to the toes. I extended the plastic out further. Of course, right now, of course, it just comes prior, basically proximal to the sulcus. But what I found is that it did not help with balance. I mean, you want to have the patients have some tactile sense to the ground. So if you add a lot of cushion underneath the brace, you're destabilizing the patient to some extent. So you want to have that thing lower to the ground. In fact, all the studies on footwear and balance indicate basically a high shoe collar and a thinner stable insole, or a thinner stable sole. So you want to have the patient as close to the ground as you can get to enhance and maximize balance. So please be careful about putting a bunch of stuff underneath it that lifts the patients up and maybe even destabilizes them to some point.
Great. Sandy also, for those left on the call, has in the comments section recommended a few other shoes. I guess that they've got good results. Let's say New Balance 1540, Apex has a good shoe, Dr. Comfort, Winter X or Winter 10. These are all shoes that Sandy.
Yeah, those are good suggestions. I like the 1540. The 1540 is very stiff, and so I love that shoe from a mechanical standpoint, but it's also a little heavy. So the diabetic styles that you mentioned, the Dr. Comforts, the Anodynes, you want to stay light and you want to stay Velcro. The 1540 does not come in Velcro that I know of. So in most patients that are seniors, you want to try to go Velcro, but the 1540 is an incredibly mechanically sound shoe. I love that shoe. Thank you for those recommendations, by the way, Sandy.
Okay. Let's see what else we have. Sorry. Not as fluid as Rich is with this. Tamara, might have already covered this, but is there a recommended weight limit for the MBB? We did not cover it. It's not a question that has come to me in the past, so I don't know if you've got some thoughts on that, Dr. Moore.
Well, you want it as light as possible. One of the things that I do that oftentimes really seals the deal is I bring one in and let them hold it. I mean, they immediately feel how light it is. So there's not a particular weight limit that I have in mind. In fact, I've weighed this on a scale. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's about the weight of a cell phone. I remember that.
Talking about the weight of the patient.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I've put some pretty big people in this. If you've got a really big person that's ambulatory, you can certainly increase the plastic thickness if you feel like you need to, as long as you can maintain that flexibility at the ankle. You don't ever want to enhance the or increase stiffness in the ankle. You want to stabilize the ankle without making it too stiff. If the patients have a more of a flaccid drop foot, I'll sometimes incorporate tamaracks to just enhance a little bit of a spring. But I've never had a patient where I thought that guy's too big for this. I've never had that happen before.
And just as an aside from the lab side, the lab automatically, without you even requesting it, will adjust the thickness of the plastic to the weight of the patient if it's in the extreme. You know, we've had patients upwards of 450 pounds that have come in with casts, and you know, we will stiffen it to some slight degree, not so much that they won't be able to dorsiflex the foot, but you know, we do automatically adjust the thickness. There's a question about what do you do with PVD patients or thick swollen limbs?
Oh, really good question. We dispense a lot of compression garments in our practice. If the patients are in a very acute state of edema, venous insufficiency, whatever, we don't cast them or scan them. We'll uniboot them. We'll kind of do a quick approach towards getting the fluid out. We'll skin them or cast them after we've gotten that out. And then we will, in many cases, cast them with a Faro extremity ease. The larger type of compression garments like those, you'll want to cast over that. For like a Jobst, Juzo, sigvaris, you don't need to cast over that. That's not going to increase the size, but I absolutely try to get the volume out before I cast them or scan them. And I do that typically by an Uniboot, but I don't ever Uniboot someone and then say, okay, now that I've got your fluid out for a day or two, good luck. I always provide compression garments. In fact, in many cases we can actually bill for them, and that's a whole nother lecture, but you can dispense compression garments with the diagnosis go to venous stasis ulcer. Anyway, okay. But yeah, we always get volume out before we cast or scan.
Similarly with fluctuating edema is another question. Same.
Well, you want to capture their mold in a state where, they're either average where they're at typically, or with a compression garment on. But yeah, thankfully have one strap. And the strap actually has a couple of areas where you could trim it, but you can ask for maybe an extended strap. That probably wouldn't be very hard for the guys at the lab to do if you feel like they need that.
Yeah, there's a question about scanning. I'm glad that came up. What is the trick to 3D scan? I have difficulty getting 360 image. We don't have time to show this video right now, but anyone who would like, I have a 45-second video of scanning for an MBB or other AFOs. If you email me at jason@orthotica.com, I'll shoot you over the video. The trick really is to separate the lower leg and foot from the chair. And there's some easy ways to do that. There are some wedges that are available commercially that you could slide under the patient's calf. And if the patient is sitting forward enough in the chair, generally we've got a clear line of sight of all the anatomy that we need to capture. Something else, if your chair elevates, you want maximum height, and if it tilts, you want maximum tilt. And if you use those three things together, usually capturing the 360 is not terribly challenging. If you're missing any of the anatomy, make it on the dorsum of the foot, because the brace doesn't come all the way around to the dorsum, and it's the posterior medial lateral contours of the lower leg and foot that you want to capture. I'll be happy to send that video and help anybody else that might have that same challenge. How does the MBB do with severe PTTD clients?
Well, it depends on how you define severe. Clearly there are patients that have balance problems as the result of their PTD. So I actually showed a patient in the presentation who has what I would refer to as moderate to severe PTD. And what I did is I ordered the MBB because his balance was awful. His balance wasn't altogether bad solely because of the PTTD, but it certainly was contributing to it. So when I ordered the MBB, I wrote on the order, add additional flange material medially to stabilize the medial column. So he just supplemented the arch and some of he added a little wedge medially to stabilize the patient. So I will tell you that the traditional form of the MBB you can't do that with. You can't do that with that. So you can treat patients with PTD with the balance brace if they have a really grossly deformed and they're walking on their basically their medium alveoli and their navicular. That may not be the best device. You may want to find something that's like a more of a standard gauntlet type device with maybe some wedging like that. But I have really good success just asking for additional stabilizing material immediately to address that. But yeah, so I would say mild to moderate, yes. And maybe some cases severe, but I would probably reserve a different style for a severe case.
Right. Sandy was talking about adding a depression, maybe a navicular.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, that can be done. Yeah,
easily done in the lab. So, Okay, we've gone quite a bit beyond our original time, so I think I've covered, if not every question, most. If there are additional questions, again, Jason at orthotica.com, I'll either have the answer or get the answer for you. Dr. Moore, in his presentation, mentioned Life in Balance tools that he uses. There's treatment room posters and tri-fold patient pamphlet. Both of those are available at no charge. Happy to send those out to you in some supply. Again, if you email me that. The last thing that did come up was samples of MBB. I don't have no charge samples. They do come at a cost. And anybody who would like more information about that, again, just email me and I will get right back to you. It's a good idea to show the patient the brace because it does allay some fears about bracing or ankle supports, and the physical embodiment of what the doctor is telling the patient. I think is important in the presentation process.
And when you get a sample, make sure it's not a size 14 man that's 300 pounds, because most of your patients are not that. And when you show them this big huge sample, it can be awkward. So get a women's size 7, or something in that size category. You don't want to freak your patients out, but that's great.
Thanks for watching. Give us a call at 888-895-1305 or schedule some time with us on orthotica.com.